such change in length of those imaginary line segments, but also the angle between the line segments. But considering the short time delta t, the deformation under consideration is short, and we are linearizing it in a sense that we are using only up to the linear term in the Taylor series, and in that way we can use the linear superposition of separating the effects of linear deformation and angular deformation. So while discussing with linear deformation and the impact of linear deformation, we are not bringing into picture the aspects of angular deformation. So as I told you in the previous class that linear deformation is something which is not directly interesting for fluid, because you do not measure length of a fluid, you measure the volume of a fluid. Therefore, volume deformation is what is important, and purely from geometric considerations, we can understand that any volume deformation is nothing but culmination of the respective linear deformations. So let us write the old volume. The new volume. New volume will be the old volume. Sorry, I mean, let us write it after full expansion, and then it will be clear to you. I should not write the final expression straight away. So new volume will be the new delta x again. I am not writing the higher order terms, those will not matter, so that is why I am not writing. So we have a expression for the new volume, and again you see that the Cartesian coordinate system we have chosen with the purpose that it gives us a simple idea of calculating the volume based on the geometry, nothing more than that, because we will generalize this subsequently. So let us now take certain commons. So delta x into 1 plus so this being the situation, what we can do is, of course, we will do a multiplication, but not just like a blind multiplication. We will keep into consideration that delta t is small, delta x is small, delta y is small, and delta z is small. So first what we will do is, I'm just identifying the relevant terms. We'll multiply these three. and then maybe we will multiply these two terms. So if you multiply these two terms, first is 1 into 1, that is 1, then 1 into the other term, then this term into 1, and then you see there is a product of two terms, this one and this one, which will make it of the order of delta t square. All our higher order terms will actually tend to 0 after we take the limit. What we will do, I'm just giving you a plan, because while doing a derivation, there are two ways of understanding a derivation. One way of understanding a derivation is, in some way it is done by a teacher, or in some way it is being put up in a book and you are just religiously following it. A better way is you try to read the mind of the person who is doing the derivation. That's why all these things are being done. So at the end, so you think about a few steps in advance, that what is the direction in which we are moving. So we are moving in a direction to calculate the change in volume per unit time. So because the volumetric strain rate, just like the linear strain rate, we will calculate. So change in volume, we will make the difference between the new volume and the old volume. That is straightforward. When we say per unit volume, that means this will come as division, and per unit time means delta t will come as division. So when delta t comes in division, the delta t square will have one delta t in it. So delta t square will become delta t, and when you take the limit as delta t tends to 0, that term will tend to 0, and that is why this product, which will be delta t square, we are not including, and we are excluding as a higher order term. So what we can exclude as a higher order term depends on the objective of the calculation. Here, since we are going to take that limit anyway, that is why it is all right if we we will do one more step before this new volume is calculated. So I will just free some space.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, yes.
Sir, could you click on an icon left side below the stylus?
Okay, okay. Just let me try it out. This one, huh?
Yes, sir, below one.
Okay. So what I do, I'll go to I'll create a page 2 and go there.
Yes, yes, sir. I mean, I thought if that could make any difference to
Uh,
scrolling.
Let me see if it works fine. So I'll put up a page and then go to page 2. Yeah, but okay, then at least the good thing is page 1 is partly visible. At least small size way I can see what is there.
Yes, sir, but scrolling is not possible, I'm
No,
afraid.
scrolling is not possible. But anyway, I mean, at least. So let me complete the derivation in page 1 itself, because I cannot see the small things in page 2. So, but I think if we enhance the size, that can be a good option later. See that. Okay. So the new volume, it will be delta x into delta y into delta z. This into, now very same thing applies. You can multiply all these with 1. And then you multiply this one with this one, because other multiplications will give this delta t into delta t and delta t into delta t. This will give delta t square. So we'll have only one additional term coming because of this, and that is nothing but 1 into this, which we have already written. Higher order terms are I'm not writing. See. So change in volume. So new volume minus old volume. So when you say new volume minus old volume, you have this one, and you subtract. You subtract this one. So when you subtract these two, the first term will be gone. So you will have delta x into delta y into delta z. Okay. So the objective of the calculation that I have told you is quite clear. That you have to calculate the change in volume. See, had it been a school level topic, this is what you would have written. Change in volume per unit volume. So original volume per unit time. So any strain, the definition of strain is, say, length in school level, change in length per unit length. So similarly, volume strain, change in volume per unit volume. For fluid, since the rate is important, and understandably so, because if you see the change in volume, this expression. So if you allow more and more time, this will simply keep on increasing. So absolute measure of change in volume is not important. What is important is what is the rate at which it is changing. So you divide it by time, but when you are calculating it at an instant, so you have to give an instantaneous feel to this. That means you take the limit as delta t tends to 0. This is normally in junior school level, you do not talk about all this. So you just grossly talk about time. But we have to keep in mind that we are actually calculating it instantaneously. That means at that given time, not only at that given time, at that given location also. Because it's an Eulerian description, we are having location specific and time specific description. So location also we have to fix. So what it means is that you must have these tending to 0. When these are all tending to 0, so first of all, when you divide by original volume is this one. So that is gone. You divide by time, so this is gone. And when you take the limit as these ones, all the higher order terms which we had not written, had we written them also, they will all be gone. So it will be simply okay. So this is an expression for volumetric strain rate. Again, although physically we have derived this from Cartesian coordinate description, but we will try to generalize it in a way that it can be applied to other coordinate systems also. So to do that, let us define the velocity vector as per our notation, and the nabla operator so now if you take the divergence of V, so simply take a dot product of these two, which we call as divergence, the dot product of the vector operator nabla with V. So you will get this expression back. So this is nothing but divergence of the velocity. Again, we have achieved one particular feat by expressing this as a vector notation, independent of the coordinate system. So what is the summary that we have learned out of it? It is beyond the mathematical expressions, and I will talk about that in a bit more careful manner subsequently. So the first thing is that the divergence of the velocity, it is an indicator of the change in volume of an identified element of fluid. Identified element means identified mass. Okay. So this is related to compressibility of the fluid. Why this is related to the compressibility of the fluid? The reason is that if there is an identified volume of fluid that is not changing with time, we say that it is virtually incompressible. If the identified volume of fluid is changing, we will say it is compressible. So this divergence of the velocity is actually the indicating parameter whether the volume is changing or not. Okay. So whether the volume is changing or not, that has to be described by this mathematical expression. Now, why this is important is that we did not refer to any principle such that conservation of mass. Conservation of mass is a very important principle, but we have not applied this to come up with this expression for the change in volume. So we can simply say that there is no change in volume of the fluid element when this is zero. Okay. So this is when it is incompressible. So why we say it's a hallmark of an incompressible flow is because we are using flow properties. We can write an equivalent hallmark for incompressible fluid. I mean, without directly referring to the flow properties, if we refer to a fluid property like density. So they are essentially converging to the same thing, but in one case, the focus is the fluid. In another case, the focus is the flow. So here, since we are using an expression where the dependent variable relates to the flow, we better call it incompressible flow and not incompressible fluid, because fluid property is nowhere coming into the picture. So in that way, this is very striking, and what previous knowledge that you have on this is like most of you are familiar with this as a continuity equation for incompressible. So how was the continuity equation for incompressible flow derived? So continuity is related to conservation of mass. So this entire derivation in any classical text of fluid mechanics will start with conservation of mass. Okay. Now conservation of mass is not directly related to the kinematics. It will be indirectly, of course, because mass is density into volume, and volume will be related to the kinematics. But I mean change in volume. But mass is not directly. In fact, mass is not a kinematic parameter at all. So getting this equation through the root of conservation of mass is of course one way, but that is not purely kinematic viewpoint. Whereas the equation that we have written, we have not used any anything related to conservation of mass. It is simply a kinematic consideration that what are the changes due to velocity, velocity gradients, etc., which is giving rise to this equation. And that is why one important conclusion we can arrive at, that the incompressibility constraint or constraint of incompressible flow, this can be viewed as a pure kinematic constraint. That means it can completely be related with kinematics, and we need not necessarily relate any aspect of mass flow or you can say mass conservation associating with it. So this is a very, very important subtle concept, because what normally happens is that all the students perceive this as a consequence of incompressibility applied to conservation of mass, rather than perceiving it as a kinematic constraint. So this is a very, very subtle conceptual thing, and that I wanted to highlight. Now the next agenda will be, so we have discussed about the change in volume. So next is the change in angle. So why the change in angle is important is because we talked about two types of deformation. One is linear and another is angular. These are the most fundamental ones in geometry. Linear is related to volume and angular is related to shear, rotation, etc. So we can say shear, rotation, etc. So uh, the outcome may be shear, rotation, change in volume, etc. But the geometric fundamentals are linear and angular. So linear we have covered. Now we will look into angular. Now when you say a change in angle, it is very difficult to perceive or to visualize a change in angle completely in three-dimensional space. But what we can do is we can decouple those into different planes. So if we take a Cartesian system like this, so if we take a Cartesian system like this, then what will happen is we have, say, just let me give an example, say angular velocity. Angular velocity will have component along all the three axes. Now angular velocity component along x, what does it mean? It means that the change in angle is taking place in the YZ plane. Similarly, angular velocity with respect to the Z axis, if we perceive, that means what we are essentially imagining that the change in angle is taking place in the XY plane. So the advantage that we are gaining out of this decomposition into the three respective coordinate directions, I told you earlier that it is because of the linear independence of this. So you can imagine, for example, thinking about angular velocity with respect to x as a separate entity without having to bother on how it will impact the angular velocity with respect to y and z, because they are linearly independent basis functions, basis vectors. So in that way, for assessing the change in angle or for assessing the rotation or shear, etc., we can easily visualize these as events in certain planes and superimpose that in a vectorial form. So if we have a fluid element, this is now a two-dimensional fluid. Why two-dimensional fluid element? I have clearly told you the reason, that we are interested to visualize the change in angle or changes in angles, different angles in a plane, and we will attribute that to the angular phenomenon with respect to the axis which is orthogonal to the plane or perpendicular to it. Okay. So let us say that this was the original element. Now after some delta t, say arbitrarily it has, I'm not really putting up anything, any particular shape, just an arbitrary shape, say A, B, C, D. A has come to A dash, B has come to B dash, C has come to C dash. and D has come to theta. So absolutely arbitrary, some change has taken place over a time delta t. Purposefully, I have not given it a very regular geometric shape, just to give you an idea that deformation of fluid will not be constrained by any regular shape. So the first observation as compared to the previous derivation is that if you draw a horizontal line like this, maybe along x, and a vertical line along y, you will see that the drawing no more ensures that AB remains horizontal. So you have a change in angle, say delta alpha. It will be small if the time is small. Similarly, this is delta beta. Okay. So change in angle is something for which we are interested to calculate the expression. That means we will calculate the expressions for delta alpha and delta beta. Again, the change in angle is not important, just like change in length or change in volume, because you allow more and more time. These changes will be just more and more. So what is important is this: what is the time rate at which this delta alpha, delta beta, they are all changing. So to understand that, what we will do is that we will first derive a geometrical expression for delta alpha. By drawing a right angle triangle, which maybe if I hatch it, it will be easier for you to understand which triangle I am talking about. Let us give a name of this point as E. So triangle AEB dash. So from this triangle, we'll just write again. We'll start with something which is a school level exercise. So this is the expression for tan theta. So tan delta alpha. So this is what we can write. So now this B dash E. So how do we write B dash E? So if you see very carefully, it is a difference between the vertical displacement that has taken place at the 2 points A and B. So what is this vertical displacement here? So at A, you have to remember that that is the your focus point, say x comma y, and at that point you have the velocity components u and v. Remember, in the xy plane, u and v are important. So over a time delta t, the vertical displacement is due to the y component of velocity, that is v. So this is v into delta t. Very straightforward. What is this? If this is v, so what will be this one? So this is not v because there is a change in v as we have gone from the point A to point B. The change in v is not due to change in y, but due to change in x, because while going from A to B, we have moved along x. So because we have moved along x, it is the change in V with respect to X or change in V due to change in X that will matter. So this is the most critical component of this derivation, because due to inertia of writing or whatever, most people will imagine that change in V due to is related to change in Y, because V is Y component of velocity. But here you have to just imagine V as a function, mathematical function, which is a function of all the variables, position and time. So the change in V here from going from A to B is due to change in X. Again, higher order terms, we can write, but it will not be important. So then the V at B is this one, and that multiplied by delta T will be the this vertical thing. So B dash E is nothing but the difference between these two. This one and this one. Difference between the vertical movements of the points A and B. So then this term will get cancelled. So we will have the term in the numerator. What will be this A dash E? It will be the extended version of AB. So extended version of AB, here extension I have shown in the diagram. It would be contracted also, depends on the nature of force. So it will be delta x plus a change in delta x. So delta x into 1 plus some change, and because the time is small, delta t, so this change is much smaller than delta x itself. Right. Now we are making certain considerations. The first consideration is you take the limit as delta t tends to 0. Again, the purpose is very clear, that we want to consider the instantaneous scenario and also at the point x comma y comma z. So first of all, the instantaneous scenario means delta t tends to 0. So when delta t tends to 0, the fluid may be at the end undergoing large deformation. But if you allow very small time, it cannot be large deformation. It has to be small. So when you say delta t tends to 0, you will have delta alpha small. So if delta alpha is small, then you can write that tan of delta alpha is as good as delta alpha. So if you just recall your basic high school study. So when theta is small, sine theta, tan theta, etc., they are all limitingly the same. So and why it is quite clear. So if you just draw a geometrical diagram, say sine theta. I'm just giving one example. So sine theta is h by L. So when you want to get an expression for theta, what you do is that instead of doing this construction, you draw an arc of a circle and you write theta equal to this length of the arc S by the radius, which is L, same. So what changes from the definition of sine theta to theta is H and S. And when theta tends to 0, what happens is that the length of the arc is so small that the arc and the chord, they are almost of the same length. That is why they are converging to be the same. Similar thing can be applied for tan theta. This is, see, always remember one thing, that from junior school we often remember formula. I mean, either we remember or we forget. There is nothing in between. It's a binary education. Either we remember or we forget. Very seldom we try to remember concepts. So if we remember such a concept which even less than class 10 level we can understand and follow, then this y, this sine theta will be tending to theta is something which we can intuitively say without maybe going through a very rigorous formal way of deriving it. So similarly, tan alpha will be tan delta alpha will be delta alpha. So instead of this, we will write delta alpha. And because the rate of change is important, we'll take the limit as this. We'll divide this by delta t. And remember that we are also taking delta x, delta y, etc. These lengths also small. So once we take this, that will not be explicitly important but implicitly important. So first is when you divide this by delta t, you bring it here. So let me just write this expression once more so that it will be quite clear what I want to say. So you can first, at the first place, you can cancel delta x. It is small, tending to 0, but not equal to 0, so you can cancel it. Remaining is when you say delta x, delta y, delta z, delta t, all those are small. So all those small things will cluster here in terms of higher order term, and those are much smaller as compared to this one. So 1 will be the dominating term, and therefore this will simply be the partial derivative of v with respect to x. In a simple notation, let us call it alpha dot. Just a name. I mean, you could give it any other name, but alpha dot is something which is a sort of a easy name to give. So if this is alpha dot, let us clear some space and let us try to write an expression for beta dot. That is the delta beta, how it changes with time. So what is beta dot? So just from your intuition, you can write that, see, for alpha dot, the length is x and the velocity is y. So for beta dot, the length will be y and the velocity will be x. So it's just like a cross connection. X component of velocity with y and y component of velocity with x. So this is the picture of what happens so far as the expressions for the rate of change of angles. But again, I mean, this is not something which directly we can use for any physical calculation related to what is happening for a fluid. So let me just write that expression, and now I will discuss that how you can relate it with something more physical. So the first physical concept related to these angles is rate of strain or rate of shear deformation. Or shear strain. Whatever. So normally it is called as rate of deformation. Why I am telling shear is because I am trying to pinpoint the impact of change in angle in terms of physical shear. So first of all, one major difference between the fluid and the solid, what you can see here, is that if you mark these two line elements, originally their angle was 90 degree. Now, because of the peculiarity in deformation and variation of deformation from one point to the other, the change in angle of AB and change in angle of AD are not the same, which in a kind of a rigid body motion you would have expected. So that differential angle is actually giving a shear. So how do we define that shear? So we can say that, I mean, this is how it is, this definition is put up, acknowledging that these two are changing angles differently, that rate of change of angle between any two line elements that were originally perpendicular. I mean, better to say in a more formal language orthogonal, but I have mentioned perpendicular because geometrically that is more obvious to follow. Now, so already those two lines are we have identified. There could be several ways of identifying this, but one most obvious is this x and y axis. They were originally 90 degree apart. So originally what was so this is the original scenario. Now after deformation, what is the scenario as per the diagram which is drawn here? So this is being moved by delta alpha and this is being moved by delta beta. So originally the angle was 90 degree. Now the angle is 90 degree minus delta alpha minus delta beta. That is now the angle between the two line elements. So that is this one. This I am talking about. So the change is simply delta alpha plus delta beta. So this is change, not rate of change. So we can say this. I mean, let me just put a qualifier here. Rate of change in. So here also rate of change of rate of change. So rate of change of delta alpha and delta beta is nothing but alpha dot and beta dot. So we can simply say that out of this physical description, that rate of shear deformation of course in this plane is alpha dot plus beta dot. We will generalize this later on with the concept of rate of deformation, where both shear and length all will be included. But physically, this is what is the shear deformation. Now, like like solids, fluid will also have some angular velocity. Again, the challenge in defining the angular velocity is that it is not rotating like a rigid body, so that whatever is AB rotating by, the same is the rotation of AD in the same direction. That is not happening. So angular velocity has to be defined artificially. This is the first thing, because you do not have a well-defined angular velocity of the entire fluid element, simply because different parts of the element are deforming and rotating differently. So angular velocity is defined as the average of angular velocity of two line elements that were originally perpendicular. So again, if we identify AB and AD as two of these, and anti-clockwise we take as positive, that this will be half of alpha dot minus beta dot. Okay. So this will be half of this. Okay. So purely from geometrical idea and by applying some definition for fluid to honor its continuously deforming nature, we could arrive at an expression for rate of shear deformation and angular velocity in a plane. In the next class, we will try to generalize this. So as I told you, next Monday I will not be teaching the class, but I will like to have some engagement of you. I will give some one or two short problems, hand it over to the teaching assistants, and so they will introduce those problems. I will share with you in the class, and you have to basically solve those problems, and then take a picture of that. So when you solve, you have to solve in a piece of paper in your own handwriting. No computer, etc. is required. Just keep free a piece of paper in which you, by your handwriting, solve those one or two problems, which are just like normally what we do in class assignment or class test, like that. And at the end of that, you can take a picture of that, and the teaching assistants will guide you where and how to upload that picture. So that is how. So this Monday's class, although physically I will not be there, but it will be a good practice for you. I'm not saying that. So I'm not saying that it will carry a great load in, or it will have a great impact in your grading in the course, but you will get a feel of what you have learned out of so far the few classes that we have gone through. So let us stop it here, and if you have any question, you can share, or otherwise we will wind up the class.
Sir, there is a difference between incompressible flow and incompressible fluid, isn't it, sir?
Yes, I mean it's a technical difference. As I told you, that when we are talking about flow, we are considering the flow variables, and when we are considering the fluid, we are primarily concerned about the fluid property. So the very connected concept, but when it is related to flow variables, we call it incompressible or compressible flow. And when it is connected through fluid property, and here the relevant property is density, we call that as incompressible fluid. And I will talk about later on, I mean, when we discuss about compressible flow as one of the chapters, that what is the connection between these two. So roughly speaking, if the density of the fluid is not a strong function of pressure, we call it a incompressible fluid. So it is fluid property relating another fluid property. That is because we are discussing a fluid, no matter whether it is flowing or not. And incompressible flow is related to a concept where the fluid is being subjected to a flow. So incompressible fluid may not be or compressible fluid, whatever, may not necessarily be subjected to a flow. It's just a matter which has its own properties like density, etc. And why pressure is referred to here is that because pressure is applicable as a concept even when a fluid is at rest. So it need not be fluid at motion, and it can be applied. Density variation with temperature is not considered to be a hallmark of compressibility and incompressibility, but density variation with pressure is. So that is the idea of incompressible or compressible fluid, and what we discussed today is the idea of incompressible.
So that means that an incompressible fluid need not be, I mean, an incompressible flow.
See, you can work out the relationship if you relate this change in beam density, and we will do that later on. I mean, even in this chapter itself.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Any other question? So if not, let us wind up today's class, and so I will meet you again on Tuesday's class. Thank you.